Hello everyone, and welcome to your DIY embroidery kit, where I'm going to walk you through how to make this floral heart wreath. My name is Megan from Embroidery Enthusiast. Thank you so much for purchasing this kit and for supporting my small business. And I hope that you love this design as much as I do. I'm going to walk you through all of the stitches that you need to know in order to make this hoop, and I hope that you'll share the final result with me on Instagram, Etsy, Facebook, wherever you found me, and I would love to see it. Before we start stitching, let me walk you through what you'll find in your embroidery kit. First of all is this practice fabric, which I've already placed into your hoop. This is what we'll use to learn the 5 different stitches we'll need to make this floral wreath hoop. Next, you'll find the design drawn on to a separate piece of fabric, which we'll be using once we've perfected the stitches we need to learn. You'll also find a needle, and finally some DMC embroidery thread to stitch with. The only thing that's not included in your kit, which you will need, is a pair of scissors, so you can grab any household scissors that will work to cut our embroidery thread. To get started, grab your practice hoop, your needle, and your practice thread. First, I'm going to teach you how to thread your needle if you don't already know. You can go ahead and cut off a piece of your practice thread. It doesn't matter how long or short your piece of thread is. And we're going to be using all 6 strands. So I'm going to take all 6 strands and just place it through the needle. And sometimes it goes on easier than others. Okay, so then we're just going to leave a piece hanging on the other side of the needle, just like that, just loose. And then we will tie a knot at the end of the thread. And I typically make a double knot. This is the end that will be in the back of the fabric. Now that we've threaded our needle, let's go ahead and learn the 5 different stitches we'll need for this heart wreath. First of all is the chain stitch. So to start, we're gonna take your needle through the back of the fabric at the beginning of the line, and we'll pull it all the way through. We always pull it all the way through so that the end of the thread is pulled up against the back of the fabric. From there, we're going to go down about a stitch length. So about here, I'm going to put my needle back down through the fabric and pull. I'm not going to pull it all the way. I am going to leave a little bit of a loop, and I'll hold that down with my other finger. From there, I'm going to come up in the middle of that stitch and pull up. And this time I'll pull all the way through. Next, I'm going to stay on the line. I'm going to go back down again about a stitch length. So a stitch can be any length. I tend to make mine a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go down about a stitch length here. And you'll notice that my previous stitch is right there in the middle. So I'm going to come up in that same hole where we went down to end our last stitch. And I'm going to pull all the way through. So I'm going to keep that up, again, going a stitch length down my line. Leaving a little loop. Coming back up in the middle to meet my previous stitch and pulling. So I'm going to continue that, and you'll notice that I'm always pulling the loop towards the bottom. So the stitch goes underneath my thread. Next, we're going to do the fishbone stitch, one of my favorites for making leaves. So we're going to start at the bottom of the leaf where it's gonna meet our chain stitch. And we're gonna make one big stitch to the top of the leaf. And I typically go past the pencil line so we're sure that we're covering it. It is just pencil, so you can always erase it, but I don't typically have to do that as I always go over top of it. Next, I'm going to come up on the right side of my stitch, not right up at the top here, but I'm going to follow the outline of the leaf. So just a little ways down, pulling all the way through. And now I'm going to cross over to the other side of my stitch to the left. And I'm going to come down about halfway down the leaf. Okay, so I've crossed over, I've pinned my stitch down. I'm gonna then come up on the left, so on the opposite side, but at the same height of the leaf. So a little farther down than our really long stitch there. And then I'm gonna cross over again. So I had come up on the left, I'm gonna go back down on the right, about halfway down my leaf, close to the stitch that we first made. And I'm gonna keep that up. So I'm gonna go back to the right, always alternating, and go down a little ways on the outline of my leaf, cross down on the left, again, going about 3/4 down my leaf, then again on the left, going down about 3/4 of the way, and I'm gonna keep that up. Next is our Lazy Daisy. So this is for our peachy flowers. So I'm gonna come up at the bottom of the flower where it's gonna again meet a stem. And this is going to go all the way through, pulling all the way through. And when I go back down, it's actually gonna be in the exact same hole, or pretty close to it. I'm gonna pull my needle through, but I'm gonna leave a little loop like we did with the chain stitch. This time I'm gonna place the little loop on top of one of the petals that I've drawn on there, and I'm gonna bring my needle back up in the middle of the loop. I'm gonna pull all the way through. Now, the tighter you pull, the thinner your petals are gonna be. But if you don't pull so tight, you'll see that they'll spread out a little bit. Now, to pin it down, I'm gonna go on the other side of the loop to pin it to the fabric and pull through. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing for the other two petals, coming up at the bottom, going back down the same hole, leaving a little loop, coming up in the middle of the loop, pulling tight, but not too tight, and then pinning it to the fabric. Then we'll do the last one. All of our flowers like this have 3 petals. They are pretty small. You can also use this stitch to make leaves. And there we go. Next is the French knot stitch. So again, we'll come up through the back. You'll notice I have not cut my thread. I've just been crisscrossing around the back, and that's totally okay. I am going to take my needle in my right hand and the thread in my left hand. You can place the hoop on the table if you'd like, or a flat surface. And what we're going to do is place the needle underneath the thread. And we're going to wrap it, so bringing the thread up. I'm gonna wrap it just once so we can get the hang of it here. And I'm going to pull the thread tightly in my left hand so that the little knot goes very close to the fabric. You can bring your needle down in the same hole or close to it. Again, don't let go of that thread in your left hand, and we'll pull down. So you can see this is a very small knot. Typically I wrap it around about 3 times. So let's try it again with 2. Pulling our thread all the way through, holding the thread in the left, needle in your right, placing it on a flat surface, and wrapping the thread around twice. Then we will put our needle back down. This is when it could just slide off, and that's totally okay. Just wrap it around again and bring the needle close or in the same hole as before. Pull so that the knot is right there at the fabric, and pull your needle through. What may happen is if you're not holding your thread tightly enough in your left hand, or if you don't bring the knot all the way down, you're gonna notice, oh, it's hard to do it, it's out of habit. You're gonna notice that it's not gonna be as tight. So it may look a little like this. So make sure you're holding it tight. So you can keep practicing as many times as you'd like. We're gonna use this to make the centers of our flowers, as well as some little white flowers as well. So you can wrap it around 2 or 3 times, depending on how big you want your knots. I've only done twice on our practice here. Finally, our satin stitch. This one is simply repetitive. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come up, you can come out on the outer edge of the petal. Remember, we're gonna have French knots here in the middle. So we're gonna come up outside of the pencil line, pulling through, and we'll make a big stitch down to the middle. You'll want to avoid your French knots as much as possible. And honestly, we're going to keep doing that the whole way around the petal. So I'm going to come back up on the outer edge of the petal and go back down in that same hole. And I'll keep doing that in order to fill. And you may want to come down a little bit to make them look a little bit circular. And there you go. We'll be using that stitch, of course, for our big flowers. I recently stitched this one with a ladybug. You're welcome to add any personal touch that you'd like, and you can feel free to keep watching to see the different steps that I take to create this hoop, what I like to stitch first, and so on.
In the morning when I wake and the sun is coming through, oh, you fill my lungs with sweetness.